touch on the idea of trauma and remembering and forgetting. This story began with, which is turned into a novel eventually. I read an article many years ago about a camp in America. It's called an adjustment camp, where if you have a troubling teenager, this Christian community will pay someone to come and kidnap your child in the middle of the night and take this child to a so-called adjustment facility, which is in Tranquility Bay in Jamaica. And I began to think about it. These are kids who are not necessarily on drugs, right? These are kids who maybe are staying out a little bit late or smoking a cigarette. So these are not children, and often they are girls who are teenage pregnancies. So I began thinking about what kind of person would do that job. What kind of so I'm very interested in, as I said, trauma, remembering, forgetting, but also the relationship between faith and the ability of faith to sometimes skew people to do the wrong thing because when they think they're doing the right thing. So this story has to do with everything. So this is a section of a book called Saving Gracie, which is the section about forgetting. It's from the point of view of the kidnapper. I blame the coyote. That son of a bitch desert dog was the beginning and the end of my life on the road. I've been running away, like Peter Pan says, since the day I was born. As I write, I am 1,572 miles and several large rivers away from the place I was born, and that isn't half far enough. But I'll never escape that coyote. I see him every day, sometimes twice a day, limping with his gaming paw across the Louisiana swamp road, going my usual speed, balls out with the radar and the fog lights on. Dark-leaved trees hung with Spanish moss line the so-called highway, and a sweet, horrible smell rises up from the road, a bog-scented mist that finds its way into the Buick, despite me having the AC and the windows shut. Worse than skunk, that smell. Annie saw the coyote first. She shouts to me, "Mr. Harris," but it's too late. There's nothing I can do. It's a kill or be killed situation, him or me. And as I'm telling you this story, I guess you'll know the choice I made. Not that I survived the crash. I only lived. And Annie, well, that's another story. One I don't think I'm going to tell you. He haunts me still, that limping coyote. There's no forgetting him. The story of my life finds its first and last chapter on that Louisiana swamp road. If you believe Annie, which you might do if you knew her like I do now, you'd think the coyote was a sign that he'd been waiting for me, that he knew I would come to him one day, that I would choose me over him. The son of a bitch didn't even try to run. He looked at me, ready, and surrendered. I guess you could say the coyote predicted all there was, all there is, all there ever will be of me. I do not forget him. And so we carry with us the ghosts of those we kill, before and after the fact. I was reading old Huck Finn last night. Some words reached out and wrung around my neck like a leash. Jim the slave knowed all kinds of signs, Huck says. I told Jim it looked to me like all the signs was about bad luck. I asked him if there weren't any good luck signs. Jim says, "What do you want to know when good luck's coming for? You want to keep it off?" Little Annie was always seeing signs, good and bad ones, on the road. Maybe she even prayed for that coyote to come, a sacrifice of some kind so she could be free. Not that she would say anything like that to me. This was our arrangement. I drove and told stories, and Annie kept her mouth shut and listened. I've always liked telling stories, my sister Gracie's stories, and other ones that no one but Annie's ever heard, that no one now ever will. They've given me this dictaphone and keyboard to work on by way of a debriefing. What went wrong and why report from Heron's greatest failure, me. But I'm not much for reports, so they can take what they get or they can lump it. I'm not recording this for Franklin Pierce, Heron, and his Christian soldiers. I'm telling you this for Gracie and for Annie and for me. For those that are lost may one day be found. Remember, they can't take anything else away from me. The setup here isn't so bad. Gates unlocked at 8 a.m., breakfast no worse than my mother's. Exercises in the yard, lunch, afternoon spent cleaning toilets, and then I tell these machines the things I can't forget. Now, I don't know whether or not it was a sign, but the first story I told family's road trip to a borrowed, run-down mountain cabin back when Gracie and I were kids. If it was a sign, it wasn't a good one. I don't recall exactly when this trip happened, but I know it was before the trouble with my daddy Lee, because he was the one driving. I know it seemed a very long car ride, but that could have been on account of everything being expanded that way when you're a kid. The whole world huge and unwieldy and summer going on and on. As I said to Annie when I told her the story, the endlessness of the journey was the point. Gracie and me sat together in the back seat of Daddy Lee's old Dodge. The sedan had been a fine car in its day, and he and our mother Amy, young as she was then, sat up front. We were on our way to the Adirondacks. Back in time, like pioneers in leather stockings we'd be, like old Hawkeye and Daddy Bunko and the Mohicans who first lived and died in those mountains, Daddy Lee said. Mama said nothing, but she sipped coffee from a big thermos and handed out frosted jelly with donuts from a cardboard box. Our parents had eloped in that very car we knew when Gracie was on her way. In the pictures of their honeymoon, they looked happy. Amy in a pink dress with a scarf over her head, posing with a parrot on her shoulder, and Daddy Lee pretending to wrestle with a painted stone alligator like he was a He-Man. Gracie and I wondered what our parents had said to each other on that first road trip. Did they listen to the radio? Did they talk about the future? About us? Or were they always as they appeared to us, silent and irritable, each of them looking out a different window? I wondered too, though I didn't say so to Gracie, whether our father had taken one of his turns during that honeymoon drive, if he had to pull over and light a cigarette to stop himself from shaking in the way we'd often seen him do, or if instead the young Amy saw a manly and competent Lee Harris sorting out an overheated engine or fixing a flat on a swamp-covered road in the dark. I never asked them. Even so, I knew the fate of our family was linked in some way to the road, and I believed if I could figure out how or why, I might just be able to save us all. But when Gracie disappeared, no, I'm not talking about that. I'm telling you about the road trip to the cabin and the thing I figured out that day. About how, with all of us inside Daddy Lee's car, it was like old Huck says about the raft in the Mississippi, if you know the bit I mean. There weren't no home like a raft after all, Huck says. Other places do seem so cramped up and smothery, but a raft don't. You feel mighty free and easy and comfortable on a raft. I recited that bit aloud to Gracie on our way back to the cabin, and I told it to Annie when she was in the back of my Buick. That far away from the collapse of our father's business and our mother's growing taste for Schlitz beer, our life on the road was a different life entirely. Not free and easy exactly, I said to Annie, not long before the coyote changed everything. No, not easy, Annie said, looking at me in the rear view, her face full of words I couldn't hear. But you were heading somewhere altogether. And Annie was right. But then, as I said, she had a way of knowing things. She even knew that I was coming to get her. When her mother locked Annie's bedroom door behind me at 3 a.m. one night 6 months ago, there sat Annie on the bed, fully dressed, suitcase packed, teddy bear in her hands. Her pretty face was sprinkled with light brown freckles, like giraffe skin stretching across her nose and cheeks. I suggested she hand the bear to her mother for safekeeping. The kids at the adjustment facility don't have much respect for sentimental objects. No doubt Teddy would have wound up down the communal toilet. I decided to drive the Buick instead of the van. There wasn't much of a risk of being jumped from the back by a handcuffed and pregnant teenage girl. And anyway, the sedan was a lot more comfortable on a long haul. "Can't you take these off?" Annie said, first word she said to me. I didn't need to look in the rear view to know what she meant. "You'll get used to them," I said. She was silent for a while, looking out the window, at what was left of her familiar world, disappearing mile by mile. "What if there's some kind of accident?" she said, eventually. "What if we crash?" Her voice was flat and soft, like she wasn't really expecting an answer. "I'm 0 for 227, honey," I said, blinking at her in the mirror. "Safest driver in the USA." An hour or so later, just past 2 Carry, Annie said to me she needed a pit stop. Now, in all my years with Karen, I never had any qualms about dragging my transports out of the van to do their business in the bushes. It was easier than walking into a Bob's Big Boy with a handcuffed teenager asking for a toilet. But Annie was different. I didn't see how I would square forcing a teenage pregnant girl to squat in the woods with my conscience. I removed her restraints and loitered like a pervert outside the ladies' room at the rest stop. I'd been to these conveniences before and knew there were no windows. The only way in or out was the door where I stood watch. 5 minutes came and went before Annie emerged, face and hands freshly washed, rubbing at her wrists where the cuffs had chafed. She seemed suddenly tiny, looking more like a 10-year-old with a pillow stuffed up her shirt than a teenage tearaway. Better, I said, and Annie nodded and walked down ahead to the car. I got in and started up the engine. You forgot my handcuffs, Annie said. She raised her thin wrists up so I could see them. No, I didn't, I said. I got kitty locks on the doors back there anyway. She dipped her head without smiling as I pulled out onto the road. She didn't seem a bit grateful for the freedom. I reckon you're not much of a flight risk anyway, Annie, I said. Got no money, nowhere much to go in your condition. Annie fiddled with the window switches. I'll stay with you till I get where I'm going, she said. Tranquility Bay, Jamaica is where you're going, honey, I said. A one-way ticket. And quit playing with those windows, I got the AC on. Annie dropped her hands onto her lap. That's not what I meant, she said. We're all on a journey, Mr. Harris. The Lord's journey. And we won't stop till we get where He wants us to be. I can't tell you about where I am now. What the room I'm in looks like. Karen are trying to decide what to do with me, whether I should be punished in public or in private for my sins. The ocean outside my window is black, and the seagulls are making their own sounds. There's only one more story left to tell. The last time I saw Annie, her mouth was welling up with blood, and my legs were pinned beneath the dashboard that had collapsed under the impact of the trees we'd hit. I was grabbing onto her arm, near ripping it out of her shoulder to keep her in the car with me until I figured out a way to save us. You've got to let me go, she said, her words full and blurred by the blood in her mouth. I'll get someone. I'll get help. My left hand was losing feeling. I can't, I said, and the effort of talking made me nauseated. There was a slow, cold burning behind my eyes, and then before me stood my sister Gracie, the sister I've been trying to forget for the past 12 years. Her own mouth was full of blood, and she was pulling her arm out of my grasp. No, I tried to say, but no sound came. This is the end of our journey together, she was saying, and I shook my head and tried again to grab her. She kicked the shattered window with the heel of her foot and dragged herself out of the car. Then she came around to face me, wiping my eyes with her fingers. We're not here to save each other, or to remember, I heard my Gracie say. We're here to love and to forget. We're here to let go. But I can't, I spat out, along with some bits in my teeth. I don't know how. Annie stood before me now, smiling and pleading and pressing her hands on her swollen belly. Then the light in my eyes was gone, and I saw now that it was early morning and the fog was dark and heavy. None of us know how to let go, Annie said. That's why the Lord gives us so much practice. It took a while for Heron to catch up with me. I was a few months in a hospital bed, a John Doe with no ID, and a few months more on the road. They found me 5 days ago. I'm not sure what happens next. They can't turn me in for freeing a teenage hostage to the Lord, but then Heron has never let man's laws get in the way of God's salvation. As far as I know, no one at Heron has ever lost a transport before, unless Annie was found. They won't tell me. Just tell us what happened on the road, they said. Tell us what you remember. Before they tracked me down, I went back to the mountains. I don't know what I thought I'd find there. Daddy Lee's old cabin with a hole in the roof 10 feet in diameter and squirrels skittering around inside. I suppose I hoped that maybe Gracie had been there too, recently. That somehow I had just missed her. That she'd come back to crawl under the cabin whose rafters were soft now and rotten through. I remember the time when we were all heading somewhere together. But there was no sign. Not a good one or a bad one. The cabin was empty and I was alone, and I could hear the leaves falling through the birches and see the coyote, teeth bared and limping across the highway, waiting there for me. And I understood this. I would not forget and I would not let go. All that I had lost was out there somewhere and always would be. Out there where creatures of the night steal away the things we love and leave a trail too dangerous to follow.
as a writer and a biographer and an editor, and without doubt one of the world's most respected translators, and an extraordinarily prolific translator and writer. Denham's translations have won the Dublin International Literary Prize, the Independent Foreign Fiction Prize. He's recently, I think last year or the year before, edited the Oxford Companion to Children's Literature. He's written biographies of Shelley, of Coleridge. He's a former chair of the Society of Authors and the National Translators Association. An extraordinary presence in world literature in this country, which we need more of. So, my pleasure to introduce Jensen.